Advaitam Harinadvaitad Acharyam Bhakta Samsanat Bhaktavataram Isham Tam Advaita Charyam Asraye. Okay. Advaitam, known as Advaita, Harina, with Lord Hari, Advaitat, from being non-different, Acharyam, known as Acharya, Bhakti Samsanat, from the propagation of devotional service to Sri Krishna, Bhakta Avataram, incarnation as a devotee, Isham, to the Supreme Lord, Tam, to him, Advaita Acharyam, to Advaita Acharya, Asraye, I surrender. Translation, because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. He is the Lord and incarnation of the Lord's devotee. Therefore, I take shelter of him. At the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a series of verses glorifying personalities other than Caitanya Mahaprabhu, including Nityananda and Advaita Acharya. So then later on in the text, Krishna's Kaviraj expands on those verses to explain the nature of Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Acharya. As we all know, we worship Caitanya Mahaprabhu as non-different from Krishna. At the same time, there is a difference because he has the mood of Radha and he plays the role of a devotee, not as the Supreme Lord. The followers of Lord Chaitanya also play similar roles as devotees, even though they may also be forms of the Supreme Lord. So within the Pancha-tattva, we have, of course, Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who's non-different from Krishna. We have Advaita Acharya, who is non-different from Balaram, who's also Supreme Lord. And then we have Advaita Acharya, who is also a form of the Supreme Lord, and also, we can say, non-different from Krishna, but a little bit different because he is considered to be Mahavishnu, Purusha avatar of the Lord. And then we have Gadadhar, Shakti Tattva, or Radharani, and Shiva's Pandit as Jiva Tattva. So in this way we have all, within the Pancha Tattva, we have representations of all forms of the Supreme Lord and his devotees in forms of Shakti, Jiva, and then expansions of the Supreme Lord. So that, of course, is summarized in Panchatattva Makam Krishna Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam, etc. So Lord Chaitanya plays the role of a devotee Bhakta Rupa, and then his first expansion is Bhakta Swarupakam, an expansion of Krishna, who is Balaram. And then Bhakt Avataram, as mentioned here. Avatar here refers to Purusha Avatar, who is distinct from other forms of the Lord, because the other forms don't necessarily appear in the material world. They also exist in the spiritual world, like Rama and Balaram, etc., and the Vishnu forms. But there are forms called the Purusha avatars who are directly related to the material world, and that's how they're distinguished from the other forms. So we have three Purusha avatars, Mahavishnu, or Karana Dakshaya Vishnu, one who sleeps on the Karana ocean. And we have Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, who is within the material world, resting on the Garbhodak ocean. So there's one Mahavishnu who produces infinite number of universes, and in each universe we have an expansion of Karanadakshay Vishnu as Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So we have millions and millions of Garbhodakshay Vishnus within each universe. And then from Garbhodakshay Vishnu we have a further expansion, Kshirodakshay Vishnu, who's resting on the milk ocean, and he expands into all the jivas within each universe. So in this way, the Supreme Lord is spread everywhere throughout material creation in more and more specific places. So Mahavishnu pervades over the whole of Prakriti and creates the material worlds. That Garbhodakshay Vishnu is the presider over each universe, and there's billions and billions of universes. And then Kshirodakshay Vishnu presides over every jiva within each universe. So in this way, the Lord pervades at all levels, down to the individual jivas, and from the whole of Prakriti down to each individual jiva within the material world. And all this is the Purusha avatars. They are functioning for the jivas within the material world. So in the spiritual world, there is no material world, so there's no necessity of having a Mahavishnu to glance over material energy, etc. So nevertheless, Prakriti will not produce material worlds unless we have the influence of the Supreme Lord. So this is what Mahavishnu does. He is that form of the Lord who interacts with material energy to cause creation of universes. And then he expands inside each universe. So therefore, the Purusha avatars are directly, more or less directly related to material world and material creation and destruction. Whereas other forms, which are non-different, exist in Vaikuntha, but they have no relationship at all with material energy. So that's the distinction. So though these forms interact with the material world, they're not touched by it. So Mahavishnu is not touched by the material energy. He glances at it from a distance. He doesn't touch it. And then Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay, enters into it, so it looks like he's touching it, but he exists within it, and he's completely uncontaminated by it. And Kshirodakshay Vishnu expands into all of the bodies of all the jivas in the material world, and he's also untouched by it. So the Purusha forms are monitoring the material world. So we say they are functional aspects of Supreme Lord, but they're at the same time non-different from Vishnu in the spiritual world. But their particular function is monitoring spiritual world, material world, witnessing jivas, etc. So that's the distinction. So therefore, we'll have a distinction between Advaita Acharya and Nityananda. Nityananda is a spiritual form in the spiritual world. Advaita Acharya represents the Purusha avatar, that spiritual form who interacts with the material world. So that's why we distinguish between them. Two different types of Supreme Lord, but also non-different. So this particular verse says that Advaita is non-different from Hari. That's why it's called Advaita. Advaita means what? Non-different, non-dual. Usually it has a very bad connotation, merging in Brahman, impersonalism. And we say, no, we don't like Advaita because there's no bhakti in Advaita. There's only one entity. There's not Jiva, there's not Krishna, there's no Radha, there's nothing. Everything is one. So generally we don't like that. But Advaita is called Advaita because he is non-different from the Supreme Lord, just as Mahavishnu is a form of the Supreme Lord. He's not a Jiva, he's not Shiva, he's Supreme Lord. So therefore, Harina Advaitat, because he is non-different from Supreme Lord, therefore he's called Advaita. And he's called Acharya because he propagates bhakti or devotional service. So he acts as a devotee as well. So he is called Bhakta Avatara. So Avatara means, of course, the Purusha Avatara. And though he is equivalent to Mahavishnu, like Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he takes the role of a devotee, even though he is Supreme Lord. So therefore he's called Bhakta Avatara. So we have three forms who are the Supreme Lord: Caitanya Mahaprabhu himself, Nityananda Prabhu, and Advaita Acharya. And Gadadhar Pandit is not the Supreme Lord, he is Shakti, Hladini Shakti of the Lord, that is Radha. And Shivas Pandit is the devotee, the Jiva, representing the Jiva. So in this way we have three parts of the personalities in the Panchatattva who are actually Supreme Lord. And two who are not Supreme Lord. One is Shakti and one is Jiva. So in this way we have within the Panchatattva we have a nice representation of the different aspects of the Supreme Lord and the devotee, which are essential for bhakti. So Advaita Acharya, the whole story is told here how Advaita Acharya acted as the immediate cause of the appearance of Caitanya Mahaprabhu in this world. Of course, Lord Chaitanya comes because he's Yuga Avatar and propagates Nam Sankirtan, that's there. But what was the particular reason? Just as with Krishna, what was the particular reason why Krishna came? Because the Devatas got together with Shiva and Brahma, and they all went up to the milk ocean and began praying that, Supreme Lord, you have to come to counteract Kamsa. So that was the direct cause. Even though the Lord, even without that, he will come, but that was the direct cause. So, in Kali Yuga, Advaita Acharya was the direct cause. What did he do? He understood that the people of Kali Yuga were very fallen and very hopeless. And he observed the people of Navadvip. And in various places it's described that though Navadvip was very famous as a city of great scholarship and learning and pundits and things like that. It was actually not very good scholarship because it was very materialistic. There were a lot of logicians around arguing with each other on very, very useless points. All sorts of bad philosophies. There was materialists around who would lavishly spend money on useless pursuits, like having marriages of dolls and things like this, and spending a lot of money on that. And of course, there were also smartas who were very, very involved in worshiping devatas. And there were shaktas, those who were involved in worshiping Kali or Durga. And tantrics and all these sort of Navadvip was full of all sorts of people like that. So, and there were people who were completely rejected all forms for just concocting their own type of worship. So Advaita Acharya saw that the people of that place were hopeless. So then he thought, well, what should I do? So then he remembered a verse, I think it's from Padma Purana, that says that simply by offering to the Shalagram Shila water and tulsi leaves, you can bring the Supreme Lord under control. And then you can ask him for anything, and he is obliged to give it. The Lord becomes sold to or purchased by a person who offers water and tulsi leaves to Shalagram Shila. So Advaita Acharya then understood that he would worship the Shalagram, so he took some Ganga Jal, which is the best of all waters, and he took the tulsi leaves, and he began to do worship of Shalagram Shila. And then his intention was to call the Supreme Lord into the material world. You must appear in Kali Yuga because it is hopeless to argue against all of these various factions who are propagating irreligion in the name of religion in Kali Yuga. So therefore he was the original cause of the Lord coming in this material world. And just as Gajendra, when he recited prayers to Supreme Lord, then the Lord in Vaikuntha heard, and then he came and he rescued Gajendra from the crocodile. So Supreme Lord also heard the prayer of Advaita Acharya, and because of his prayer and the worship and sincerity of Advaita Acharya, then the Lord decided he would come into this material world, so he came in the form of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So that's the story related here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he's the immediate cause of the Supreme Lord coming into this world. Just as we can say that Mahavishnu, he produces, he is the source of all the avatars that manifest within this material world. So Advaita Acharya was the cause of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appearing. So he is depicted as elderly. We see him usually with white hair because he was quite old actually compared to the others. When Lord Chaitanya was born, he was somewhat elderly at that time. So when Lord Chaitanya grew up, then of course he was much older even. So he was an elderly person, and but very great, though he is Supreme Lord, he was a great devotee of the Lord, a great Vaishnava. And he lived in Shantipur, which is not too far away from Mayapur. So that was his residence. So the Advaita Acharya is equated with Supreme Lord being non-different from him. But he took the role of a devotee, so he's called Bhakta Avatar. So he was manifested very great devotion to the Supreme Lord, even though he is Supreme Lord. So he was a great Vaishnava. And when Lord Chaitanya appeared, it's described that he came to see the newborn child, understanding that he was, Supreme Lord, etc. So from his very birth, the birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Advaita Acharya was connected with him. when Caitanya Mahaprabhu began to grow, of course, he showed certain signs of being extraordinary, like having the marks of the thunderbolt and the mountain and the the chakra and the lotus and the mountain on his foot. That was astonishing. Many things were astonishing about him. But as he grew, then he became like a naughty child, like Krishna, teasing people, etc., teasing the young girls. And then later on, he went to school, and then he became a very, very proficient in logic, which was, of course, Advaitacharya and others were not too fond of, because this was all very atheistic. But Lord Chaitanya became very proficient at the grammar and then logic and things like this, and he would argue with people and defeat them all the time, which is not interesting for Vaishnavas. So many of the people or devotees were rather disappointed that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was doing all this sort of activities. But then he went to Gaya to do the Shraddha rites for his father, and he got Diksha with the Krishna mantra, and then he returned, and then suddenly he was different. He became a great devotee suddenly. And of course, he not only got mantra, he also got the holy name, so he came back and he started the Sankirtan movement. And of course, some people opposed that, and even his students would criticize sometimes, but nevertheless, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did this. And so when he changed like this, Advaitacharya was very, very pleased, and he became his follower, even though Advaitacharya was very young, old at that time, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very young. He was, just maybe 15 years old or something, 14 years old. But all the devotees were very pleased, and Advaitacharya was very pleased when he showed these devotional symptoms. So after that point, Advaitacharya was, even though he was elderly and was very respectable, he became the follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu throughout Lord Chaitanya's existence, and when he was in Navadvip in Mayapur, and later when he went to Puri. So Advaitacharya was always very, very devoted to him, in spite of the fact that he was so much elder. So this is you could say, the hierarchy. Though Lord Chaitanya was much younger, nevertheless, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the center of the Panchatattva, and all the other forms of the Supreme Lord, that is Nityananda and Advaitacharya, they serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in spite of the fact that Advaitacharya was older, and even Nityananda was older also, but they served Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he is Supreme Krishna, and they are other forms of the Lord, non-different, but at the same time, they also serve. So Advaitacharya played a very significant role in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. Of course, when Lord Chaitanya had Navadvip pastimes of Sankirtan, then Advaitacharya was a participant in those pastimes. And when Lord Chaitanya went to Puri, then yearly all the devotees from Navadvip would walk down to Puri and stay for about 4 months. And they would do this for many years on end, going back and forth. Stay down 4 months, go back to Bengal. Next year again, go down. So they were so devoted to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that they would walk every year, which takes about maybe 2 weeks. And it was not, we'd say, a safe journey also, because there were all these dacoits and stuff, plus there were Muslim tolls and all sorts of things, and you had to cross the rivers and pay the ferryman and this, and they would trick you and do all sorts of things, and the Muslims were there, so they would try to extort a lot of money from you. So it was not a safe journey also, but they would trek down there every year, and then trek back to Navadvip and trek down. And Advaitacharya would also go there, even though he was an elderly person. So he was also very devoted to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in spite of his being so elderly. So he is also said to be Shiva in many places, or Sadashiva, which is a little confusing because how is Vishnu Shiva, etc. But then it's explained that Shiva actually is an expansion of Mahavishnu. And we see that also described in the Brahma Samhita. So Mahavishnu is there, and then he expands into a secondary form, like the effulgence of Mahavishnu becomes the Sambhu or Shiva, who interacts with Prakriti, and then that causes material creation. So he's like, his expansion, Mahavishnu's expansion is Shiva. So Shiva also is considered non-different from the Supreme Lord. Of course, we also say he is not the Supreme Lord, but simultaneously he's not a jiva. So in that sense, he is also Supreme Lord. And in other works, for instance, I think it is Murari Gupta's Karacha, he wrote a short work which is a precursor of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So in there, he describes how Lord Chaitanya went to various Shiva temples and was respecting Shiva nicely. And then sometimes he would fall into ecstasy of Shiva or something, or Shiva's devotees, and he would hear stotras to Shiva, or have the devotees even recite verses to Lord Shiva, and he would be pleased with that. So the reason is that Shiva is like an expansion of the Supreme Lord, but also a little bit different, as we know, because he manifests 55 qualities instead of 60 qualities, but he is not a jiva. And he is also a devotee of the Supreme Lord. Just like Mahavishnu becomes a devotee of Krishna, so then Shiva also becomes a devotee of Krishna. And he's in a special category because he's not a jiva. So Advaitacharya is sometimes identified as Mahavishnu and sometimes as Shiva, because they're close together in the sense of involved in the creation of the material world. So Mahavishnu glances over material energy, and then Shiva interacts with Prakriti, and then we have material creation taking place. So he's also associated with Shiva. We have the offense to the holy name. Don't equate the name of Vishnu with Shiva, and think they're the same. But the same statement can be taken that don't commit the offense of thinking they're different. So we shouldn't think of Shiva as an ordinary jiva also. Because he's like the Supreme Lord, he's a special category. So he's simultaneously different, non-different from the Supreme Lord. We can make the same distinction between Krishna as Swayam Bhagavan and the Vishnu forms. They are also non-different, but then we also distinguish Krishna has 4 special qualities and the others are a little different like that. So they are the same, but simultaneously we say they're different. So in, for instance, Nectar of Devotion there, Rupa Goswami points out that according to Siddhanta, Siddhantatas Abheda, that Krishna and Vishnu are non-different. So then why do we say, well, we want to glorify Krishna and call him Swayam Bhagavan? They're non-different, they're one entity, but the form of Krishna has special attractive features that Vishnu does not manifest. So therefore, we make some distinction also. So there is oneness and there's also difference between Krishna and the Vishnu forms. So similarly between the Vishnu forms and Shiva, there is similarity. There's also some difference. So we shouldn't really think of him as completely different. At the same time, we cannot think of him as completely the same. So both aspects are there in him. So anyway, Advaitacharya, as I said, a great devotee of the Supreme Lord. And he had a great, associate. That is, Haridasa Thakur is often associated with Advaitacharya. Apparently at the birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Haridasa and Advaitacharya were together, and then they understood when Lord Chaitanya was born, and everybody was chanting the holy name because of the eclipse. And they said, "Oh, Lord has appeared." And Haridasa Thakur became very ecstatic at that point. So even at the birth of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Haridasa Thakur was associating with Advaitacharya. So this was, according to normal social standards, not proper, because Advaitacharya was not a Hindu. He was born in a Muslim family. So how a Brahmana, Advaitacharya, who was a very respectable Brahmana of Shantipur, could associate with a person who's not even a Hindu? Well, of course, the Brahman should not even associate with the Sudras or lower castes, but he was associating with Haridasa Thakur. And the reason was because they were more interested in bhakti. So therefore, Advaitacharya had a very nice relationship with Haridasa Thakur. He is avatar of the Supreme Lord. He's also distributing bhakti, and he plays the role of a devotee. So therefore, he was very, very respectful to Haridasa Thakur. Very, very, and they were great friends. So throughout the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, we often see Advaitacharya and Haridasa Thakur together, associating. So, though Advaitacharya was respected as a Brahmana at the same time, because he was a Vaishnava, he took the Vaishnava principles as much stronger, and therefore he disregarded some of the normal rules of the Varnashram system to honor the great devotees of the Lord like Haridasa Thakur. So in this way he was ideal in his conduct. So Advaitacharya, a very, very great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, but simultaneously he's also not a jiva, he's Supreme Lord. So he has a special position. So he had a very devotional relationship with Caitanya Mahaprabhu. In spite of the fact that he was elderly, he acted as the servant of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Because just as Krishna is supreme and all the other forms of the Lord serve him, so Caitanya Mahaprabhu is supreme and Advaitacharya serves him. At the same time, they're all playing roles as devotees. So he was a great assistant in the pastimes of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. When Caitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas in Katwa from Kesha Bharati, after that, then he went to Advaitacharya's house after that. And from there, after meeting his mother, Sachi, then he went off, after that he went off to Puri. So he had a very intimate relationship with Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, any question there?
Maharaj, when the Supreme Lord or Shaktis appear as devotees, like in Panchatattva, what kind of rasa they have to the Lord? It's all dasya, or
the Panchatattva?
Panchatattva, say now Advaitacharya, Nityananda Prabhu, and as a Shakti Tattva, Gadadhar Pandit, or experience dasya or anything?
Well, Nityananda is Sakya. This is Balarama is Sakya. Advaitacharya has a rather reverential mood of dasya. Of course, Gadadhar Pandit is Madhurya Rasa, obviously. And Srivas Pandit is definitely dasya because he's like Narada Muni. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maharaj, Kshirodakshai Vishnu expands the Paramatma in everyone's heart.
Yeah.
So our relationship is with Krishna, who is our Ishtadeva. So does the Paramatma take the form of our Ishtadevata, or?
Well, it's the opposite way around, actually. Krishna is the source of all the other forms, including the Paramatma form. For the devotees of Krishna, when we perform devotional service, then we're worshiping Krishna as Bhagavan, so that Bhagavan, we could say, replaces all the other forms. So that Bhagavan becomes our inspiration, our guide, and our witness and everything for us, instead of Paramatma. So the form of Paramatma is superseded by Supreme Lord himself as Bhagavan through devotion.
And for devotees
See,
who...
Paramatma is more or less a neutral witness of everything. Bhagavan is the one who interacts with his devotee and cares for his devotee and is controlled by his devotee, etc. That's a Bhagavan form. So we're interested in establishing a relationship with Krishna, so then he interacts with the devotee.
And for devotees who establish relationship with Nrsimhadev, Vamanadev, like that, then for devotees who establish their relationship with Nrsimhadev or other forms of the Lord, then again Paramatma
so then
is not
they'll see Nrsimhadev in their heart.
Thank you, Maharaj, for a nice lecture. My question is that if demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma can't understand Lord Krishna, then how can we in this insignificant form of life try to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead?
If they cannot understand, how can we understand?
Yeah. How can we try to understand?
Yeah. So, of course, Shiva and Brahma and Devatas, they're devotees. Generally, they understand Vishnu. So, to understand Krishna and appreciate him is very, very rare. And the example is given of how Brahma went and stole the calves and the cowherd boys, because it's Krishna, he's just eating food with cowherd boys. What is this? How can he be God? So, very, very difficult to understand Krishna in relation to, because they usually think of Vishnu. So it requires a certain type of devotee to appreciate Krishna, not an odd reverence form, but a form of sweetness. So then we have to cultivate that, especially through mercy of devotees who have a relationship with Krishna. So Krishna is a little bit difficult to understand because most people prefer greatness and awe and reverence of Vishnu, so it's difficult for them to understand Krishna. Caitanya Mahaprabhu is even more difficult to understand because he acts more like a human being than even Krishna. He is Krishna, but he's also playing the role of a real human being, a bhakta. So he tends to hide his powers even more than Krishna hides his power. So therefore he was even more difficult to understand for many people. But if we're devotees, then of course we can understand. So it depends on the mercy of the Supreme Lord, which depends on the devotion of the devotee. So if you're a devotee of the Lord with that particular mood, then the Lord reveals himself to you.
Maharaj, this is probably a very left field question. Srila Prabhupada's mission is an instrument of Lord Caitanya. Lord Caitanya is manifest in the Panchatattva. Are there examples in Srila Prabhupada's mood or mission of the Panchatattva, especially Advaita Acharya?
Advaita Acharya in Prabhupada's pastime?
Yeah.
What you're saying, that he is the equivalent of Advaita Acharya, or what?
I was just trying to tease out in your studies if you'd come across any examples of how Srila Prabhupada has expressed the mood of the Panchatattva in his mission.
Particularly, well, his usual mood is simply to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya, following his order, not particularly identifying with those, the Panchatattva themselves, but rather following the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and particularly Nityananda, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave Nityananda that order to stay in Bengal and preach there. So Nityananda became famous as the real preacher because he went everywhere. He went from village to village of Bengal doing kirtan and having discourses and giving mercy to everybody. So he's the prime example of the preacher. So we can say that maybe Prabhupada was inspired by that. So that's why we also have a lot of Gaura-Nitai deities everywhere, which are not quite common in Gaudiya Math. They'll have a Gauranga deity in Radha Krishna. They don't have Gaura-Nitai deities. There are a few Gaura-Nitai deities. I think in Ambika Kalna there's Gaura-Nitai there, a few places. But largely it's just Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Radha and Krishna they have in the Gaudiya Math temples, for instance. So, but then Prabhupada has Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda were there. So Nityananda is probably there because of that big preaching effort. He followed the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and dedicated his life to preaching.
Maharaj, here we see the Lord appeared because the call of Advaita, and also Advaita Acharya was informing the Lord, okay, you finish the pastime.
Yeah.
So here we see time to time the Lord is acting like a henpecked person and he is totally surrendered to devotees.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult because we're trying to be a devotee and the Lord is also want to serve the devotee. How to reconcile this,
Well, the aspect of the Lord being coming under the control of his devotee is one of the main qualities of the Supreme. Not Lord Chaitanya especially, but all of the forms of the Lord, they are controlled by their devotee ultimately, in spite of the fact that Supreme Lord is independent and supreme and he's the controller of everyone. He falls under the control of the devotee. That's the sixth quality of bhakti mentioned in Nectar Devotion, Krishna Karshani. Krishna is attracted to bhakti. So the devotee has bhakti, Krishna becomes attracted to that person, even though he's the most attractive. Krishna means most attractive. He's attracted to the devotee, especially in prema. So that's not just a quality of Krishna, but any form of the Lord. Even Vishnu is under the control of his devotee also, as we see in the story of Ambarish. So there, Vishnu says, I'm under the control of my devotee also. And my Sudarshan chakra is under the control of Ambarish. I can't do anything. If he's going to burn you up, then you have to go and get the mercy of Ambarish in order to stop the Sudarshan chakra from burning you, whatever. So in this way, that's one of the outstanding characteristics of the Lord. It may look like a fault, because then the Lord doesn't look like he's independent. But it looks like a fault, but it's the greatest quality. Because the Lord should respond perfectly to the devotee and should be very attached to the devotee. One who has devotion for him, he should respond equally. So therefore, it's said to be the greatest quality of the Lord that he has such affection for the devotee. So it's not a fault at all. It's actually a great quality. So it doesn't mean that he is henpecked or whatever. It simply means that he is attracted to devotion. If we show devotion to the Lord, he responds even more. And therefore, by that, he comes under control of the devotee. So we never take it as a fault, but rather as one of his most outstanding qualities.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, there is a famous song which glorifies Lord Advaita Acharya, Tava Kripa Bale Pai Chaitanya Nitai, that by his mercy one can achieve Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Mm-hmm. So today being that special day, how can we act to attract that mercy of Lord Advaita Acharya so we can achieve the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda? Thank you.
Well, we simply utter prayers to him, offer our respects to him, sing glorification of Nityananda by chanting those prayers or chanting his name. That's how we get his mercy.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. I heard Advaita Acharya has some sons. They were became Mayavadi. Is that
became
impersonalist?
Oh, Well, yeah, I mentioned Chaitanya Charitamrita, some branches were unbona fide and others were bona fide. Some of them went off the line, I think, and I don't know if it was like impersonalists or whatever, but they were definitely not on the right path of devotion, pure devotion. So therefore, we don't accept those followers. Exactly who they were. One was, Lord Chaitanya, Advaita Acharya does have a parampara line coming down, Diksha line. There is still present in different Babajis and others, I think, like that. So we can say maybe that's the bona fide line. Then other lines, I think they went off and they weren't Vaishnavas or something like that. Exactly, I don't know. Anyone know? No.
That means he has a vamsa, like a family line.
Yeah.
Still existing.
Well, I don't know if there's all family line, but even his, was it his? Who was his daughter? Became a guru also, I think. Advaita Acharya's daughter became a guru. She became a guru. But yeah, there is people who trace back a lineage, whether it's strictly from his line or whether it was one Brahmin disciple who started a line like that, but they trace it back to Advaita ultimately, like that. Huh? Yeah, it's the same with Nityananda. It's not actually all Nityananda's line. It's certain Brahmins who took initiation from Janava or Virabhadra, and they started a line. So they're not all seminal lines from, Virabhadra or thing like that. So many of them are just Brahmins who started lines from them, and they trace their line back that way.
In Mahaprabhu's Jagannath Puri pastime, we see that Mahaprabhu wanted to go to Vrindavan. At the same time, again and again, devotees trick him. Now this festival is happening, so stay for some more time, stay for some more time. So when we see the Lord has the great desire to go to Vrindavan, and before that, I think Sanatana Goswami told before he was going to Vrindavan, told, okay, this is not the best time to go because you have so many followers.
Yeah,
then Mahaprabhu didn't go. That was understandable. There is a reason.
Yeah.
Here, Mahaprabhu really wants to go to Vrindavan, but devotees are not really serving his desire, and it is not one time and for a prolonged period. And at the end, then Mahaprabhu said, no, this is my decision. Now I had to go. Then the devotees say, oh yeah, the Supreme Lord, you can do whatever you want, like that. So why devotees are acting in a way against the desire of
Well,
God?
we can say that's their attachment to the Lord. Just like the gopis in Vrindavan don't want Krishna to leave, but he leaves, like this. Maybe for a short time he'll stay with them, but actually he'll leave eventually because that's his plan, whatever. So the devotees, we can say it's their nature to be attached. So therefore they express that by saying, you stay here, you stay here. But if he has a desire, he'll leave, and then they accept it when he does leave. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, just